But organisationally, in fact, pushes the other way, to not take risks, to play it safe. That said, there has been rapid sector growth, and the point that Emerson made about the rise in welfare under Howard is actually true. Now, the rise in welfare under Howard's actually been at the punitive and compliance end. That's where it's occurred. But if you have a look, one of the popular mythologies is that there's been a decrease in spending in welfare. That is not true. In fact, as both a proportion of GDP and in pure monetary terms, there's been a steady rise across the board in Western nations in welfare. It's continued to go up. Now you come back to me and say, hey, that's not my experience. You know, things have been really tight, and that's right. What's happened is, along with that, there's been a growing realisation about the sort of significant needs there are. So although welfare spending has increased, it has not kept pace with rising demand. As well as that, and this is probably, at least by some views, these ones have been the most significant change in the day-to-day operations. We have now had a full embracing of a market approach to the human services. And that's happened at a number of levels. It hasn't just happened with a shift away from grants into being much more about contractual arrangements. It's also about the push to have human service organisations become much more entrepreneurial and to be looking at markets. On the way here, I drove past an office of, I think it's Work Plus, isn't it, the Selvas. They have done very, very well indeed under this regime, as has Mission Australia and a number of others. And when I say very well, I mean exceedingly well. To the point where now they're actually quite big conglomerates, private or not-for-profit conglomerates. Mission Australia, you know, who here can remember Mission Australia 10 years ago? Very small organisation, right? It's not a small organisation nowadays, I can tell you. The other thing, and this probably is one of the areas that are most affected directly anyway, the role and function of social work, and that's the rapid rise in case management. For those of you who are around long enough to remember what casework was about, casework was fundamentally about relationship. You formed a relationship, a close relationship. It was relatively unsupervised as far as monitoring and accountability, but it used the dynamic of relationship to effect change. What we had brought in was, and heralded as a result of often of scandals where there were abuses of power, etc., by social workers and others, so it's sort of a bit too precious to have this. Case management now is much more a role of management, that I'm not responsible for actually helping you to change. I will link you in. I may do the assessments that help. Quite a profound change in the way we do our work. Auditing and proceduralism are part of that, part of case management. And they are important changes for us to know and understand. Along with that, we've had codes of conduct and organisational compliance regimes. So, whereas social work, certainly 20 or 30 years ago, there was very little surveillance, managerial or otherwise, of what social workers did in a day-to-day sense. That is not the case today. And in fact, a lot of what social workers spend their time doing is sitting in front of these screens, putting in numbers and doing reports. This probably hasn't come through really well, but you'll see the two guys, and there's obviously a garden sort of party. And the one on the left says the managerial class is getting richer and the underclass is getting poorer. And the guy on the right says that's good management. Okay. Let's have a look at the community. I mentioned earlier that diversity abounds nowadays, and particularly in Australia, where which we are one of the great successful nations, immigrant nations. If you remember, for those of you who don't remember, just around at the end of the Second World War, we were a country of about 5 million people. We were a very small country, population-wise. We've gone over the 20 million, and we've been hugely successful in embracing people from around the world. That of course means that that the social programs that we offer have to address that sort of complexity. And along with other Western nations, we've gradually moved from a sort of a Fordist approach to a post-Fordist. What's that mean? A Fordist approach to production is we've got one model and it's black and everybody has to have that. The post-Fordist approach is quite different. It says basically we'll try and match our product to individuals. And welfare programs have gone down a similar approach. And one of the big areas you need to look at is disability funding. Where now there's much more, rather than a sort of off-the-shelf program, we've got now individual packages that are organised individually, or at least the attempts are made to do that. That said, government, one of the great tribulations of government at present is that it is becoming, and this is not just in Australia, but in democracies generally, governments have found it increasingly difficult to engage with the population. Why? I think there's a range of reasons, but a lot of people, frankly, don't trust government very much. The language of government doesn't appeal, doesn't resonate with them, doesn't have any connection with their real day-to-day problems.